We are from Basavaraddi BA and BCom College, Dharwad. Okay, I am handling cost accounting subject for BCom 5th sem student. Last class we have solved problems on Taylor's differential piece rate. Okay, in this class also I am discussing the problems based on Taylor's differential piece rate. Let us start the problem. Problem number 1. From the following particulars, calculate the earnings of a different workers under Taylor's differential piece rate system. Standard time per unit 6 minutes. Normal rate rupees 5 per hour. Differential piece rates 80% of the piece rate below the standard, 120% of the piece rate above the standard. In a day, 8 hours. Anil produces 70 units, Sunil produces 80 units. Okay, let us start the problem. Working note number 1. Calculation of standard production per hour. Calculation of standard production per hour. Standard production per hour is equal to total minutes per hour divided by number of minutes required for the production. Total minutes require 6. Total minutes ಎಷ್ಟು ಬರ್ತದೆ 60 minutes divided by number of minutes required for the production is 6. 6 ones are 6 tens are. So 10 units per hour. Second, working note number 2. Calculation of standard production per day. Working note number 2. Calculation of standard production per day. Standard production per day is equal to number of units per hour, number of units per hour into daily working hours, into daily working hours. Number of units per hour is 10 into, already calculated in working note number 1. Daily working hours 8. 10 into 8, 80 units per day. 80 units per day. Next, working note number 3. Calculation of piece rate. Calculation of piece rate is equal to rate per hour divided by standard production per hour. Standard production per hour. Rate per hour is 5. 5 divided by standard production per hour is 10. 5 ones are 5 twos are 0.5 per unit. 0.5 per unit. Next, working note number 4. Calculation of differential piece rate. Calculation of differential piece rate. A. Low piece rate 80% of the piece rate is below standard. 80% of the piece rate. 80 divided by 100 into piece rate is 0.5. That is 0.4 per unit. Next, B. High piece rate. High piece rate. 120% of the piece rate. 120% of the piece rate. 120 divided by 100 into piece rate is 0.5. That is 0.6 per unit. 0.6 per unit. Fifth one. Calculation of earnings. Calculation of earnings. Earnings is equal to unit produced into differential piece rate. Unit produced into differential piece rate. In case of Anil unit produced is 70 units. Earnings is equal to 70 into differential piece rate. Working note number 2 ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಬಂದಿದೆ ನಮ್ಮದು ವರ್ಕಿಂಗ್ ನೋಟ್ ನಂಬರ್ 2 ದಲ್ಲಿ ಆನ್ಸರು 80 ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಸೊ 80 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ಗಿಂತ 70 ಯೂನಿಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಲೆಸ್. ಸೊ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ದ ಲೋ ಪೀಸ್ ರೇಟ್. ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್ 0.4. 70 into 0.4 rupees 28. Next, in case of Sunil. In case of Sunil, earnings is equal to ಅವನು ಎಷ್ಟು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ 80 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್. 80 into working out number 2. Here the differential the standard production per day is 80. Avond unit produce 80 other. So we have to consider the amount of above piece rate, that is high piece rate. 0.6 is equal to rupees 48. Rupees 48. I hope you understood. First we have to calculate the standard production per hour. Our number of minutes ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ 60 6 ಮಿನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಸೊ 1 ಮಿನಿಟ್ಗೆ 60 ಮಿನಿಟ್, ಅದು 60 ಮಿನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡಿ 6 1s 6 10s 10 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಪರ್ ಅವರ್. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ ಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಪರ್ ಡೇ. ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಪರ್ ಅವರ್ into daily working hours. Number of minutes per hour already we have calculated in working note number 1. 10 into daily working hours ಎಷ್ಟು ಅದ 8 hours they are working. So 10 into 8 80 units. Next working note number 3, calculation of piece rate. Rate per hour divided by standard production per hour. 5 divided by 10. 5 divided by 10, that is normal rate is 5. So the rate per hour is 5 divided by standard production is 10. 5 1s are 5 2s are. One is calculation of differential piece rate. Low piece rate, 80% of the piece rate, 80 divided by 100, piece rate is 0.5, that is 0.4. High piece rate, 120% of the piece rate, 120 divided by 100 into 0.5, that is 0.6 per unit. Next, we have to calculate the earnings. Calculation of earnings. Earnings is equal to unit produced into differential piece rate. DPR is nothing but differential piece rate. In case of Anil, earnings is equal to unit produced 70 into 70, working note number 2 kinta kadime ಇದೆ. So we have to consider the low piece rate 0.4. 70 into 0.4 rupees 28. Then in case of Sunil, earnings is 80 into 80 is more or equal to the standard production per day. 80 into 0.6 rupees 48 is the earnings of Anil and Sunil. I hope you understood. The next one is number 2. Calculate the earnings under Taylor's differential rate system. Normal rate per hour rupees 6. Standard time per hour 30 seconds. Differential piece rates, 80% of the piece rate below standard, 120% of the piece rate above standard. Okay. Sudeep and Darshan produces 800 and 1000 units respectively. The number of units per hour. Number of units per hour or daily working hours. Working hours is 8 days. Okay, let us start the problem. Working note number 1. Calculation of standard production per hour. Working note number 1. Working note number 1. Calculation of standard production per hour is equal to total seconds per hour divided by number of seconds required for the production. Okay, total seconds, because the standard time per hour is given in the seconds. We have to consider the seconds. 3600 seconds divided by 30 seconds. 0 get cancelled. 3 ones are 3 ones are 3 twos are 0. 120 units per hour. 120 units per hour. Next, working note number 2. Calculation of standard production per day. Standard production per day is equal to number of units per hour into daily working hours. Number of units per hour already calculated. 120 into daily working hours is 8. 120 into 8, 960 units per day. 960 units per day. Next, working note number 3. Calculation of piece rate. Piece rate per unit is equal to rate per hour divided by standard production per hour. Standard production per hour. Rate per hour is 6. Standard production per hour is 120. That is 0.05 per unit. 0.05 per unit. Next, working note number 4. Calculation of differential piece rate. Calculation of differential piece rate. A. Low piece rate. Low piece rate, 80% of the piece rate. 80% of the piece rate, that is 80 divided by 100 into piece rate is 0.05. The answer is 0.04 per unit. 0.04 per unit. Second, high piece rate. High piece rate, 120% of the piece rate. 120% of the piece rate. 120 divided by 100, piece rate is 0.05 is equal to 0.06 per unit. 0.06 per unit. Working note number 5. Calculation of earnings. Calculation of earnings. Earnings is equal to unit produced into differential piece rate is equal to units produced into differential piece rate. Piece rate. A. Sudeep is equal to unit produced is 800. 800 ದು differential piece rate 0.04 is equal to rupees 32. B. Darshan 1000 into 0.06 rupees 60. I hope you understood the problem. First we have to consider the in seconds ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಮಿನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟ 3600, ಮಿನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಟ್ಟ 60. 3000 ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ ಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಪರ್ ಅವರ್, ಟೋಟಲ್ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ಸ್ ಪರ್ ಅವರ್, ನಂಬರ್ ಆಫ್ units ಅಥವಾ number of seconds required for the production of 1 unit. 3600 divided by 30, that is 120 units per hour. 120 units per hour. Second, calculation of standard production per day. Number of units per hour into daily working hours. 120 into 8, 960 units per day. Third one, calculation of piece rate. 120 into 8, 960 units per day. Calculation of piece rate per unit. Rate per hour divided by standard production per hour. 6 divided by 120, that is 0.05 per unit. Working out number 4, calculation of differential piece rate. A. Low piece rate. 80% of the piece rate, 80 divided by into 0.05, 0.04 per unit. B. High piece rate, 120% of the piece rate, 120 divided by 100 into 0.05, that is 0.06 per unit. Next one of earnings. Earnings is equal to unit produced into differential piece rate. Sudeep, unit produced 800, differential piece rate depend upon the working out number 2, that is 960. 800 less than, so take the low piece rate. 800 into 0.04, 32 rupees. Darshan 1000 into 0.06, because it is more than 960, we have to consider the high piece rate. 1000 into 0.06 rupees 60 is the earnings. I hope you understood the problem based on Taylor's differential piece rate.